Alright, what's going on everybody? Today I'm going to be bringing you guys a review for DC and Warner Brothers Aquaman movie. This is, I believe, the 5th movie in the DC Extended Universe, or DCU, or whatever they want to call it. And I'll say this right off the bat, I enjoyed this movie. I think that this movie was way better than Wonder Woman. I think Wonder Woman was very overrated. I think it's way better than Justice League. I honestly think that this movie is probably their second best effort. And I think the best movie that they've had so far was Man of Steel, which I think is underrated. And honestly, I've been looking at the reviews for this movie, and it feels like people are kind of middle of the road about it. I feel like it's going to be one of those movies, just like Man of Steel, that is very underrated. It's going to be one of those movies that isn't really appreciated by a lot of people. But with this movie, it's directed by James Wan. He did the Conjuring movies. He did Insidious, Saw, and he's a really good director. I'm glad that they got him on board instead of just letting Zack Snyder do his thing. Because we've had a lot of Zack Snyder influence when it comes to these DC movies already. So it's nice to see somebody else put a stamp on one of these DC superheroes. So with this movie, basically the premise, the story plot or whatever, we got Arthur Curry. He is Aquaman, or he grows up to be Aquaman. We get his origin story and everything. And the main conflict is his half brother, who is currently the king of Atlantis, Orin, I believe his name was, aka Ocean Master. Orin from Atlanta, or Atlantis, excuse me. Basically, the king of Atlantis, he's planning on going to war with the surface world, but in order to go to war, he has to basically get the approval of at least 5 of the 7 kingdoms. I believe it was 4 of the 7 kingdoms, excuse me. But basically, Atlanta, or Atlantis, they're trying to go to war with the surface world, because basically above ground we've been polluting the waters, we've been killing their children basically, and they basically want to go to war. And with this movie, I thought it was really from a story perspective, I thought it was well written and well directed. With this movie, I could really give props to James Wan for a few things. So first of all, I feel like DC and Warner Brothers, they had a mandate. They told them right off the bat, because a lot of these critics over the years, two of the main criticisms when it comes to DC Universe movies, and I guess comic book movies in general, or at least, some of them, not all of them. I don't think Marvel's been criticized for a few of these things I'm about to mention. When it comes to the darkness of DCEU, one of the main criticisms was, your movies are too dark. There's no fun in your movies. Y'all need to be more like Marvel, basically. And then another criticism with a lot of these comic book movies, especially from people that aren't really into these superhero movies, is just the fact that origin stories, they've gotten kind of played out. They're kind of by the numbers when it comes to a lot of these movies. And I feel like they addressed a lot of these concerns, a lot of these criticisms, because especially when you get to Atlantis and you get to see Atlantis in the movie, it's very bright. The CGI, the special effects in this movie is really, really good. It's really well done. They honestly tried to go for a Wakanda moment with Atlantis when you first see it, and they're showing off the world, the animals, the technology that they have, the advanced technology. They really try to go for that Black Panther Wakanda type of feeling, and it works. It's definitely a way brighter movie, and I can definitely appreciate that, even if a lot of scenes in the movie are obviously going to be underwater, so the CGI, the special effects, it's not going to look as good as it probably would have looked if it was above ground or whatever, because obviously it's going to still be dark because you're underwater. There's nothing that they could have done to really, there's nothing they really could have done to kind of make the CGI really look any better than it already did. But hats off to the people who did the special effects, because, when I say it's bright and this is a brighter film and it's very colorful, they definitely didn't go for that whole 1 or 2 color tint on the the tint on the camera, or just going with a few colors. Is definitely a colorful movie, and it's definitely a more fun movie when when you compare it to something like Justice League or Batman versus Superman, it's definitely more lighthearted. And even Arthur Curry, Aquaman, in the Justice League movie, he was having fun in that movie too. He was like one of the standout characters in that movie, and his personality, his the actor playing him, Jason Momoa, he does a great job really just owning this character. And this interpretation of Aquaman, it's definitely different from the comic books, and it seems like James Wan, it seems like he definitely went over the source material, and the other people that were helping to write the film, it seems like they crammed so much into this movie. Because honestly, I'll say this, it felt like this movie is about over 2 hours and 30 minutes. It felt like a 3-hour movie. And it's not to say that I didn't feel like it felt too long. I'm honestly happy that this movie felt long. I'm actually surprised that, because for those of you guys who don't know, DC and Warner Brothers, they've had a track record of cutting out scenes in movies over the years. Like with Batman versus Superman, they cut so much material. Same thing with Justice League, and same thing with, I believe, Suicide Squad. And I'm so happy with this movie. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes. You definitely, if anything, you definitely get your money's worth when it comes to this movie. There's so much in there. There's big battles in there. There's so much of the source material crammed in this. And honestly, it almost feels like two movies, but it's not one of those cases where it feels like they were juggling too much. Like there's at least maybe 3 or 4 subplots, and I feel like they juggled it pretty well. One criticism that I guess you can kind of levy toward this movie is maybe for some people it might feel like flashbacks, because there's a lot of flashbacks in this movie. It might feel like the flashbacks, like when you're watching the flashbacks and then like the present day stuff, it might feel like you're watching something that's kind of just tied together. I don't want to say poorly, but it's not glued together the right way. I mean, maybe some people would probably want that. They would probably want like the flashback stuff first and then go into the present day stuff. But I like the way that they went about telling the story. I like the way that they did the flashbacks in between the present day stuff, because this goes back to what I was trying to say earlier about the criticism with the origin story. Because people criticize the origin story movies because a lot of origin story superhero movies is very formulaic. Like with Venom, take Venom, and I actually kind of enjoyed Venom, but that was kind of formulaic when it comes to an origin story movie. But with this, at least they had a lot of the origin story kind of sprinkled throughout. They had a lot of flashbacks sprinkled throughout the movie, and then also your present day stuff. And there was just so much more content in this movie, especially if you compare it to something like Venom. Like you definitely think, if anything, even if you're not a fan of DC movies, I think you'll get some type of enjoyment out of this movie, whether it's just the fight scenes, the special effects and everything, and even the acting. The acting isn't even bad in this movie. And I can say this, man, this movie, when it comes to the acting, it's way better than Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's acting was so terrible, especially with some of the villains. The villains took me out of it, but with this, the villains weren't bad. At least I didn't think the villains were bad at all. Honestly, I think the fight scenes are way better in this movie than Wonder Woman also. And I'm bringing up Wonder Woman because that is like the highest rated DC EU movie. That's the highest rated DC live action movie. And I feel like this movie, it exceeds Wonder Woman. It almost exceeds Man of Steel, where I think it kind of falls short in comparison to something like Man of Steel, is that it didn't really have that level of emotion there to kind of really get you attached to Arthur Curry. There was a moment with his father early on that I'm not going to spoil, that really kind of gives you that heartfelt moment, but there's nothing else, outside of that. There's obviously they were trying to set up for Arthur Curry, Aquaman, to because he, if you're familiar with the comics, he ends up marrying Mira, who's played by Amber Heard. I'll say this, I didn't feel like they really forced their relationship too much in this movie, although there are like scenes where you can tell they're kind of pushing toward that, and then by the end of the movie they're in love and stuff. But it didn't feel too forced, and I'm happy to see that Mira, she, like, everybody in this movie, I can say everybody in this movie felt like they were like skilled fighters. Like all of the Atlanteans, Aquaman himself, even Mira, like nobody felt useless. Like even Aquaman's mother, when they show her in the beginning of the movie, when they're talking about Aquaman's birth and how his mother and his father met, his mother beats the crap out of the Atlanteans that try to go get her, right? And I can say this with the fight scenes, like I was saying earlier, the fight scenes are way better than Wonder Woman. I think this movie has some of the best fight choreography, the best one-on-one fights in the DC universe so far. I mean, I can say this: that both the fight scenes and also the camera work. The camera work in this movie deserves to be praised. I mean, it wasn't one of those movies. Like, it's not one of those movies where the camera is shaking all the time. Like the director doesn't know how to hold the freaking camera, and it's not one of those movies where like the action is so fast or so jumbled that you can't tell what's going on. I can tell just about every single hit. I can make out what's going on. The only time where the only time where scenes get too jumbled, where a scene gets is too cluttered, is when it's like that final act. And that's the issue that a lot of DC Universe movies so far have had. They've had that issue with that third act, man. They just love to just throw CGI, and it's not just DC. It's not just DC doing this, because Venom had that problem this year, and Venom is a Sony movie, and even Marvel movies sometimes have this problem. But in this movie, I feel like you can kind of give it a pass for, like, at the end of the movie, there's a lot of CG, and you can't really complain about there being a lot of CG in this movie, simply because, I mean, there's no other way they could have done this movie outside of CG. And the CG doesn't look bad. Like I said, the special effects does not look bad at all, period. And there's even a big war scene at the end, and that's not a spoiler because that's in the trailer, and I love seeing that. So overall, I think that Aquaman was a really good movie. I don't think it's like Man of Steel level, at least for me personally. I know there's some people that don't like Man of Steel, so if you don't like Man of Steel, you might actually go out of this movie thinking that it's one of the best movies, or is the best movie of the DC universe. So overall, I gotta say, I would probably give Aquaman an 8 out of 10 maybe, but for other people it might just be a 7 or a 7.5. Let me know what you guys think about Aquaman if you've seen this movie. Like the video, subscribe if you guys want me to do more movie reviews and stuff like that in the future. Thank you guys for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.